you know, you and I have been involved in things in the personal development industry for many years, since the inception of Fintech Solutions way back in June 1999. So we've withstood the trends and the fluctuations and interests of many different sort of models and frameworks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, as you know, the Fintech Solutions was founded upon, integral theory, and we both, resonated with that model in a way that sort of inspired us to, articulate it and look for applications of its use in the business world. And to a large extent, we've both carried that forward even to this day. And it's one of those enduring sort of models and frameworks that continues to support and it continues to inform. So along the way, as I said, I was doing my research and what have you, and integral theory is one of those models that are really significant. There's other models and frameworks that come and go, and we kind of pick them up and drop them down, and
Mm-hmm.
they've got their use, but significant. So in the course of my research, I've come across a model, and this is why I wanted to share it with you, which I find is to be quite profound. And the reason why I think it's gone under the radar, because it's been around for a long time, 40 odd years it's been around. And I think the reason why it has gone unseen is because it comes from a philosophical perspective, not a psychological perspective. And things as they unfold, the psychological people hang around in their circles, the philosophy people hang around in their circles, and never the twain shall meet. Right. And so what this body of knowledge is a body of knowledge called formal axiology. And
Formal axiology. Mm.
formal axiology. Let me just describe what formal axiology is. Axiology is the the area of values and valuation. It's how the human being values something. So that's a whole body of philosophical research that goes back to Husserl in Germany, in the early, late 18th century, 19th century, lots of sorts of understanding about what axiology is, and there's a lot of money. The formal part, which makes up formal axiology, is formal meaning science.
Evidence
And
based. Evidence based.
well, let's just put that one on pause for a moment, because I'm going to, talk about something else with regards to it, and it sort of touches on just what you've said there. Formal meaning a science, a scientific approach to the understanding of human values, right? So scientifically looking at and understanding values. Now that might be, a statement that can be, how can you scientifically understand values? Well, let me put it like this, and you will recognize this. That if you think about mathematics, for instance, mathematics is based upon an axiom. An axiom is a principle. An axiom is an underlying sort of generalization which is true. So the whole basis of mathematics is based upon axioms, which makes us come up with formulas like E equals mc squared, for instance, is a mathematical formula which is based upon the axiom of mathematics. Where you will appreciate this is music is also based upon an axiom. It's a principle, right? That there is certain sort of mathematical formulations in music that make it something which is repeatable and even scientific, that you can't argue with a tone or a chord sequence or whatever. It is what it is. You kind of measure it.
Well, even the division of frequencies over octaves, it's a pure mathematical equation. A440, and then the next octave 880, and so on. So there is, especially when you look at harmonics and how the resonant frequencies, it can all be plotted on the graph. It's amazing.
Yeah. So when you think about the structure of equations, if you think about the structure of music, you can also think about the structure of values.
That blows my mind.
Values. Yeah. Okay.
That blows my
Okay.
mind.
So this is what I want to share with you. I want to share. I'm going to give you some context, some background to this, and sort of unpack it a little bit, and just go through one facet of this body of knowledge called formal axiology.
Just before you get into that, Ron, I'd just like to say for people who might be watching this, that I'm Frederick Krasey from FKC Health, and today I have with me Ron Laurie, who has various hats and banners and involved in integral theory, spiral dynamics, spiral systems model, and 100 other things, and now axiology. So Ron, please introduce yourself and what you're about so that we give context to anyone watching this video.
All right, so basically I'm a facilitator, I'm an advisor, I'm a certified chair. I basically work with organizations inside the organization and outside the organization, helping organizations and leaders of organizations be more effective in what they do. And I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I've worked with some of Australia's top employers, like Coles, John Holland, multiple government departments, pharmaceutical sectors, sports sectors, entertainment sectors, and overseas as well. I've worked in the Philippines, Vietnam, USA, Malaysia. So I've been around, and I've been around the space of leadership facilitation, organizational development.
And I reckon it'd also be good to give the World Game a plug at the same time, just as a teaser. So
yes. Well, the world game, which is somewhat in mothballs at the moment in a COVID world, and the reason why it's in mothballs at the moment is because it's a live action role play simulation involving up to 120 people who get to run the world for a day. And so in socially distancing sort of restrictions that we're on at the moment, it's not possible to get 120 people into one space to play on a map of the world, which is the size of a basketball court. And everybody gets to play a role in running the world. So that will reemerge. It's not gone. It is still there, but at the right timing, it'll resurface and it'll be back on the stage again. And we've played that around the ASEAN region and in the US and multiple times in Australia for corporates as well as public programs. So yeah, keep listening about for that. That'll resurface.
And the World Game is based on, originated from Buckminster Fuller, who Ron and I are both good fans of. Just to give you some more context, Ron and I started Fintech Solutions, 20 years ago, something like that, maybe 21, 22, something like that. And I devoured Ron's bookshelf and took 20 years to sort of come to terms with what it had done to my head. It's all good. So Ron, continue with axiology. So we've given people context of our relationship and what's going on here.
Sure. So I think the best thing for it to do now, Fred, and I'm going to share screen with you and take you through a little bit of a presentation just to give us some context and to give us a sort of map to run across, which will keep us on track with the conversation. So this is an introduction into a particular profile that comes out of the assessment that you had taken, Fred, and I call it the Integral Axiology Leadership Index Profile. Bit of a mouthful there, but it is something that has axiology in it, and the particular IP that I bring to this, because formal axiology has been around for a while, is what I've been able to do is integrate it with integral theory. So what in effect we have here is an assessment that helps people understand their quadrant bias. Now, that might not mean anything to anyone, but basically what we do is we look at the world through three three perspectives. Our own first person perspective, and we generally describe ourselves as I have a house, I have this, I have that. You know, we first person perspective. Second person perspective, we might sort of relate something to someone else outside of ourselves in second person perspective. And then third person perspectives it's a construct, it's an object or something that doesn't really talk back to you. It's just kind of like an object. So all these ways of doing, we'll actually touch on these things as we go through this presentation, so you'll get a sense of that. Okay, so let me continue here and just go through this, Fred. And so, as I was saying in the kind of intro there, you know, this is a scientific assessment of values. All right, so I don't expect anyone to believe me, but what I wanted to do is to sort of lay the groundwork on people's curiosity, so they actually go and find out for themselves, and they verify it for themselves, because it is a science. It's a science of values. So I'm going to make some definitions first of all. And the first definition is, what is values? Well, value is a definition. It's a principle that help you to decide what is right and wrong and how to act in various situations. That's what a value is. We all have values. And I just want to be clear right up front that what I'm referring to when I talk about values is general values, not specific values.
Okay.
Give me an example. Give me an idea of what a specific value is. I might value a car, a color of a car. I might value the way, you know, a piece of furniture looks. I might value a sports team. I might, you know, we value specific things. But the values we're going to explore here are values which are general values. So let me unpack that as we go, and we'll explore what they are. Because these values lie at the root of every decision we make. They play a pivotal role in our attitude, our trait, and belief construction, even our personality construction.
Wow. Can I ask you a question just there, Ron?
Yeah, sure.
Look, that impacts me because I have a belief about beliefs, and I believe that values are a belief cluster, you know, like they're constructed, and that's what holds them in place. Whereas beliefs are movable, they're transient, they're just useful. They're like building Lego blocks, right? But a value seems to be a cluster, a molecule of these beliefs. Is that how this is headed? And that's why we're saying it's a trait and belief construction, because that's lines up with my thinking.
Well, if you think about the bedrock of values, and then what comes out of that bedrock are the clusters, if you like, that they actually orientate around, and it's also, you know, creates our own personalities as well. So it's, you know, in philosophical terms, you know, it's phenomenologically there. I mean, it is running as a background operating system, right? But it's not really in our awareness. So let me explore that. Values that drive us are very often not consciously in our awareness. Like a computer operating system, they sit below the apps, right? So we're on a Zoom call right now. We're using the Zoom app. We are not really aware of the operating system that is allowing us to do this. We're only interested in the app that lets us do it, right? So the values I'm talking about are really like the operating system on which the apps sit. So let's just explore that a little further. So again, you know, the values definitions that help us decide in the right and wrong. Very often our values are emotionally laden, have unconscious biases, and based on untested assumptions. Because they're below the surface, and because they're kind of operating there, we are sometimes triggered by the emotional, you know, aspect of the values, and we sometimes don't realize why we've been emotionally triggered. But it's because of a deep underlying structure of values that we're actually acting on. So think about it like a computer program error or a virus that affects your computer operating system. In other words, if you have an erroneous virus on your computer system, that is not in your visibility, but is actually causing problems with your apps, then it's similar to values. You might have a value structure that is operating that you are not aware of, that's affecting you, your decisions that you're making in the apps, apps that you're running in your life. So we need to get absolute clarity on what those values are that are operating unconsciously within us in order to have a better decision-making skills and exercise more powerful choices.
This is phenomenal, Ron, because what this leads me to see is that I often say as a joke when I'm talking about counseling to people, I say, oh, some people don't really have a hardware problem, it's a software problem. And other people, well, there's a hardware problem, something's broken. But really, at the end of the day, our mindsets are infected with social and economical and socioeconomical biosocial viruses all the time, and our thinking is polluted from that perspective of the meta programs that run in our mind.
Most definitely, and that's why I mentioned that they're emotionally latent. Some of those things that you mentioned there's emotional tagging going on that affects the way in which we see things, and the biases that run. Yeah,
powerful stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into the guts of it then, Fred, and we'll look at what are these dimensions of value at the root of all choices. When we talk about values, what are these? So the first place we're going to go is to look at the three dimensions of values at the root of anything, and that is intrinsic values, extrinsic values, and systemic values. So we're going to unpack that a little bit, and we're going to use an example of a house, right? And we're going to look at a house, a thing, and we're going to look at it in three ways: intrinsically, extrinsically, and systemically. So let me go through each of these three columns and look at that. So intrinsic values. Intrinsic means belonging to something. So let's just say an example of a house, right? I might say in my languaging, this is my house. I have a house. I value my house, right? So we are actually valuing that house for ourselves. It's intrinsically valued. It is my house. And that is our first person perspective statement. I have a house. It's my house. And we hear that all the time. That's kind of obvious.
And my relationship, my wife, my children, all intrinsic values.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Let's look at extrinsic values. Extrinsic values are tangible facts about something. We might say of that house, look at the renovation job done on this house, right? So we're extrinsically valuing a renovation job done on the house, right? We might be looking at the way in which it was constructed, put together, the veranda or whatever it is. We extrinsically value that sort of thing, and we call it that thing. So it's a second person perspective.
Is this where keeping up with the Joneses values lives?
Absolutely, especially that's a really good sort of point of view, because what we do is we tend to put these two things together. We say, look at my house, it's not as good as my neighbor's house, right? So we're valuing two things simultaneously there. We're comparing the extrinsic of one house, comparing it with another house, and we're identifying with it and saying my house is not as good as that house.
Or better.
That's exactly right, or better. So what we're doing here is we're just artificially teasing these apart in order to, we're going to deconstruct before we integrate again, just take these aback. So you get that in the second person, we live in that house. Pretty easy to hear that in the languaging of something. So intrinsic, extrinsic. Now systemic is another way of valuing things, and this is about process plans about something. So we might say, here are the architectural drawings of the house, right? It's how the house is going to be made. So we're still looking at a house, but we're valuing it differently. We're valuing it as a system.
So this is qualitative.
Probably a little bit more quantitative. Extrinsic is a bit quantitative, and systemic is also a little bit quantitative as well. You know, that here's a set of plans. Here is what the house is going to look like. Here is the section 42, Fred, right? It's not actually the house. It's a systemic sort of concept of the house.
Okay.
Get what I'm saying?
I guess where I came in qualitative, it was definitive of the integrity of the plans, the integrity of the house. This is how it's going to be made. So when I said qualitative, I was thinking from an integral perspective of what was being presented. So the system itself, or the systemic outflow, was what I was valuing, which is in a way some sort of aesthetic too, you know, as far as the extrinsic value. So there seems to be a similarity there to me.
Yes. Yeah. So let's just tease this around, because I think one of the powers of this is that we don't often contemplate these three, this level of valuing when we actually think about something. But we're actually, these are all melded in. But if we separate them aside for a moment before we integrate them, we'll have a look. So let's keep on going. Let's look at a business, for instance, right? If we had a business, we can value it intrinsically. We could say, this is my business. I have a business. This is my business. It's my sort of expression of myself. This is my business, right? So that's intrinsically valuing it. Extrinsically value it. Look at the products produced by the business. Look at the products and services by the business. It's not saying my business, but look at the products. Now, we produce this product in our business. It's a thing that you often hear in the business world. Look, I have a business. This is my business, and here are the products that I make in my business. So what you're doing in that statement is there's intrinsic and intrinsic in the same sort of sentence, if you like. Systemically valuing a business, we could say, here is the business plan, the quality checking process of the business. We could say it's how the business makes its profit, how it's sustainable. Right? It's not about the products and services. It's about the systemic processes and procedures of the business that helps the business make the products.
Could the products themselves have a systemic value? In other words, this is how the actual product functions and the needs it meets. So there's the systemic way it plays out.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah. So what we've done so far is just looked at intrinsic, extrinsic, and systemic from this perspective of things out there. A house is out there, a business is out there, and we just value it three ways. So what this is looking at is that what we've done is the outer of this triangle here is our thoughts about the world and our interactions with it. And as we've already seen, we can value my house. We can talk about the shape of my house extrinsically, and we talk about the plans extrinsically. So that's the outside world. We also have an inside world of valuing as well. We value our inside world, our thoughts and ourselves, intrinsically, extrinsically, and systemically, right? So I'm going to give you through examples of what that means when we're internally within ourselves, valuing ourselves intrinsically, extrinsically, and systemically. Okay. All right. So let's look at the inside world. Let's just take it from the point of view of a leader. Me as a leader, the inside world view of me as a leader. So intrinsically belonging to something, the definition, we could hear someone saying, I am a leader. I am a leader. That's the intrinsic identification of themselves as a leader. And it could come across in language, I'm aware of the value my leadership brings. First person perspective, self-referencing, I am a leader. Now,
The
you
I
would hear
am,
people say,
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. The I am premise is strong there. I am a leader. I am aware of my values. It's
yes,
about me, and it's where I sit in relation to my existence.
exactly. Yeah, that's what that reference is, the intrinsic identification with yourself in a role, in this particular case, as a leader. Extrinsically, you can say, I am a leader, but I have a role to play as a leader. You could be saying, look at what I'm achieving as a leader. You could value your role that you're playing as a leader, which is slightly different from you valuing yourself as being a leader. Being a leader and a role as a leader are two different things. Sure, they're intertwined, but if you separate it out, first of all, we see that this is very important for us to consider. We'll have a look at that as we go through this presentation as well.
That's a fantastic point, because I'm looking at the second person perspective, and I see where a lot of leaders require validation. So they say, not only look what I'm achieving, but this is the impact of my leadership, and look what I've caused, and look at the effect and the onflowing. And I see this as where people get the identification of their value within the system that they're interacting with. So this extrinsic value, if there's not validation and impact, the leader is not a leader, because no one's following him or her.
Yes,
or her.
Exactly right. So, I mean, these are great points, and we're going to flesh this out as we go forward, Freddie. So let's look at the third area here, is the systemic valuing the processes of yourself as a leader. I see my leadership direction. I have a clear identity of myself in leadership, right? So someone who values their leadership journey, or where they see themselves going in their leadership journey, right? So they value that systemically, and it has a directionality associated with it. It's not the achievement that they are having at that point in time as a leader, and it's not their self-identification where they are at that point in time, but it is their future sort of sense. They systemically can see where they're going to go as a leader,
So
on the career, for instance.
what's lighting up for me right now and exciting is I'm seeing the bottom right-hand quadrant of Wilber's model, the systemic side of things, where the person actually sees themselves as part of the system and recognizes their role and their distinctive process in that system.
Yes.
Powerful.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, but they may not still see themselves as a leader. They may be achieving leadership outcomes. They may be working with the system, but they are still not seeing themselves as a leader.
Because of the lack of the intrinsic value identification.
Absolutely spot on. Yeah, exactly.
Cool. I'm loving this, Ron. I'm loving this.
So we looked at the outside world in regard to a house and a business, but let's now look at the outside world of a leader, right? Just say it's a leader, right? Intrinsically, the outside world, I have an understanding of people, right? And that is an intrinsic valuing of people. Someone who sort of belonging to someone, I understand, I relate to human beings, I understand people. There's an intrinsic valuing of others outside of oneself. I'm aware of my people. That's an intrinsic valuing of the outside of themselves as a leader. Extrinsically,
Wow. Sorry,
yeah.
wow.
No, go
I
ahead,
just got a
Fred.
complete identification with this myself. It actually hit me that I do have an understanding of people. I am aware of my people. Yeah, I had an identification, a moment. That's cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
And interesting you say that, Fred, because we are going to come to your profile, and one of the elements of the profile, one of your strongest elements, if you could say, is your way in which you intrinsically value other people, right? So it's interesting that you haven't even seen your profile yet, and yet you've resonated with this aspect, which is your strongest characteristic.
Wow. Yeah,
Now that's
it just energetically just went right through me. That's scary. Scary nice.
well, you can see that your association with it, right, is you. You know, so even although we haven't debriefed you on the profile yet, you can see that you resonate with it because it is valuable to you. It's a value that you have. Right. So cool. All right. So extrinsically, I understand how to get things done. Look at the results I am achieving as a leader in the environment outside of myself, right? This is different between the sense of achievement you might have inside yourself as leader. You know, you might have, you know, an appreciation of yourself and what you're achieving. But what we're saying here, extrinsically value, look at this, look at that, look at this, look at that. In the outside world, this is what I've done as a leader. So valuing the extrinsic elements of you as a leader outside. And thirdly, systemically, as a leader, I can understand the systems and processes. I understand what they have to do. I have a strategic plan. You know, here is my business plan. Here is my strategic objective. You know, this is a leadership plan I'm going to, you know, deploy within my organization. It's not actually the stuff that's getting done. It's the plan of what's going to get done, right? Okay, so inside, outside, we've looked at a couple of ways, and we've you know, looked at this intrinsic, extrinsic, the systemic. Any questions that come out of that, other than the ones you had, Fred?
I guess when I read, I understand how to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
My middle name is I get shit done.
Yes, you do.
Yes, I'm a gun. I get stuff done.
Yes, you do.
Like Billy reckons, you know, I go in like a Green Beret commando and there's bodies everywhere. I do get stuff done. And why I value that is I see a lot of people who have great hopes and aspirations, but there's no action and there's no outcome. So I understand the systems and processes, and I do have a strategic plan. Mind you, it's taken a long time for me to formulate it and have it show up, but I'm working the plan. Yeah, no, I really resonate with this. This is just going straight in. I love it.
Fantastic. And I'm not going to give too much away, and I hope you don't mind, but there's certain sort of characteristics that come out of these values that you have here. Let me just read some of the key words that came out for you, Fred. Do you mind if I sort of share them? Would that be all right?
No. This is beautiful. Let the world know my good, bad, and ugly. It's all good. It's all good. I'm not embarrassed.
I just want to reinforce just what you said. So your worldview has described you as an organizer, right? And in your self-style pattern is described as an achiever, right? Does that make sense to Frederick? You know,
100%.
Right? An organizer, achiever, organizer. So again, you haven't even looked at the profile yet, but you know, you've said it by, again, your resonation, you get things done, right? You achieve, you get things done. All right. So let's go on as we continue this journey. So what I want to put to you now is that we've separated these things artificially, but inside yourself, you have these 6 values conversations going on in your head at any point in time, all of them trying to give you advice, right? Down one, this hypothetically think about, down one side of your head, you've got this is what you should be feeling, doing, and thinking, kind of value conversations going on in your head about the world of work, right? Another 3 conversations you've gone on in your head is this is who and what you should be being, achieving, and becoming in your world of work, right? Wow. So these 6 conversations, which we've artificially teased apart in the context of leader, are going on in your head. Now, the question here then comes, as we sort of look at it, you sit at the head of the table. You oversee the meeting that runs in your mind. You are not your thoughts. You oversee your thoughts. You can choose which internal mind advice you want to listen to, right? That's the premise. Get what I'm saying?
100%. 100%. That's good.
These values conversations that are going on in your head are conversations which are not really you. They're your thoughts. They're your values and valuations that you have sort of habitually sort of developed. And what we're suggesting is that you can oversee these thoughts. These thoughts don't have to dominate you anymore. You can oversee these thoughts so that you can choose what internal mind advice you want to listen to.
So if you don't, you know, if you're schizophrenic, you will never be alone. You got a lot going on in there.
Well, these conversations are friendly conversations, but they might be giving you some biased advice. And so what we want to do is we're going to look at your 6 advisors and explore the kinds of advice they might be giving you, right? Because these are advisors in your head. What kind of advice are they giving you? So let's have a look at that. So what you want to figuratively think about here is that your board of 6 advisors are ready to advise you on what and how you should or should not think about your work. So you've got let's call it the board of advisors inside your head, right? So in the external world, right, we have the empathy intuition advisor, which really talks about the intrinsic value of the outside world. Outside world, the doing. This is the extrinsic valuing, your practical judgment advisor. And this is the systemic outside world, the thinking and your systemic advisor, right? That's all telling you about what's happening on the outside world. In your inside world conversation, you have the being advisor. That's your self-esteem advisor. It's how you feel about yourself, your beingness. Then you have another advisor telling you what to achieve. This is your role that you play in life. How are you achieving what you're achieving? And then we have the becoming advisor, which is telling you about your career, your self-direction, and where you want to go, right? All these advisors vying for their piece of advice that they're trying to give to you inside your head. All right. Let's explore this a little bit. And it's interestingly, it's not just a gender thing either. It's a female male thing. There is no gender bias here. It's not feminine and masculine. These 6 advisors are inside your head to the same extent, whether you're a male or female. All right.
Quick question here, Ron. Is there more than 6?
Well, you know, so what we looked at the values, right?
Because I think I'm hearing voices.
How those advisors are competing for your attention. Let's just have a look at that, right?
Yeah.
So here's it. How clear are your advisors communicating with you? That's a question. How clear how is your feeling advisor communicating with you? How is your personal direction advisor communicating with you? How is your systemic advisor communicating with you, right? What unconscious biases do your advisors bring to the table? So this might be the other voices going on inside your head, Fred.
So the advisors have advisors?
The advisors are influenced, and they are influenced emotionally. And it's just your emotional makeup that actually influences the advice that your advisors are giving you. We're going to look at that in a second. What advice are you going to take of your internal advisors? What advice are you going to reject? Giving you the power to be able to do that. So here we go a little bit, but we're now into the, into the rabbit hole. We're going down the rabbit hole with this a little bit, right? But I want you to, we're going to use this illustratively to see if this sort of resonates. So let's go back to the house. An intrinsic value, something belonging to someone. My house. Have you ever, even in your foray into real estate, Freddie, many years ago, had you ever heard the statements, "This is my house," and had they ever overvalued it because it was so emotionally connected to themselves that they overvalued their house? And have you ever come across someone who undervalued their house in an intrinsic way?
Wow. I'm heavily aligned now with the allied health industry, and my body is my house, my temple, and I can see people overvaluing and undervaluing their physical house all the time. I mean, real estate's a perfect example, but when I apply it to the physicality of my health and well-being, which I'm passionate about, that resonates. Wow, undervalued, overvalued. Yeah, got it.
Fantastic. So let's see this. So an intrinsic value either overvalued or undervalued, right?
Got it.
And an extrinsic value, look at the renovation job done on this house. That extrinsic value overvalued or undervalued. Have you ever come across someone who have overvalued the renovation job? Right? They put so much value in the renovation job because of what it is. Right?
Yeah, like the gooses with the six-pack abs, but they've got no brains, and their relationships are falling apart. They've overvalued their physical house.
Yeah.
Or undervalued, they haven't taken care of themselves. Yeah.
So you get the physical house, you can overvalue it or undervalue it in terms of, let's just say, one facet of that house, a renovation job. And thirdly, in the systemic ways of valuing, here are the architectural drawings of the house. They can be overvalued or undervalued. So let's give an example here. Look, an architect, for instance, who puts a lot of time and effort into the plans can sometimes overvalue the plans of that house. The owner, right? The owner, right, gets a set of plans. They undervalue the set of plans. They just want the house constructed. So you can see, even just in that example, how overvaluation and undervaluation of just one thing, like a set of plans, can actually be a really interesting sort of domain to
this impacts me emotionally, Ron, because working with Sage Active Clinic, we have a $40,000 machine. It's called an in-body scanning machine, and people jump on, grab the electrodes, and it gives them a baseline with bone mineral content and muscle and body fat ratio, the whole gamut. I think there's 21 factors. But here we have the plans and the architectural design of that person's beingness in a physical sense. And here we have the overvaluation and undervaluation. I see this play out. I see where the systemic values, because people are so self-reflective when they're into health, they're looking at getting neurone testing and muscle testing, and it is phenomenal. But I can see the over and undervaluation from a systemic point of view in the human body and the health aspect. I have come from real estate, and I can see your real estate analogy, but I'm just more connected to this analogy to get more juice out of it.
Yeah. All right, let's go on to a business. Let's just apply the same overvaluation, undervaluation on a business, right? So in your world, Fred, that you're in business consulting, have you ever come across a business owner who said, "This is my business. I built this business from the ground up. This is my business," and heard them overvaluing their business because they've got this emotional connection to it, because
100%.
they intrinsically value it.
100%.
And at the same time, you have a business owner who might undervalue themselves in their business, my business, right? They might not be utilizing the total, possibilities of it because they're undervaluing it from their own self-intrinsic sort of relationship.
Oh, okay. It's not actually the business itself. It's their intrinsic value related to the business. Absolutely. I've seen people that don't realize the potential. They're not engaged, they're not passionate. The business might have been handed to them, there's momentum there, but they don't feel their value in it. And they say, well, I'm only a figurehead, or other people are carrying the business, and they haven't plugged themselves into the level they could. So they're undervaluing themselves. Or at the other point, they feel that without them, the business is nothing, and it's really the people around them. So yeah, got it.
Exactly. And so just going back to that notion of advisors, right? If you are a business owner, right, and the advice that you're getting inside your head is, this is my business, and that business is being overvalued, and it could be overvalued emotionally. It could be undervalued emotionally as well. Now, if you're getting advice from an internal advisor inside your head or about your intrinsic relationship to your business, and you're undervaluing it emotionally, would that or would that not have an impact on the decisions that business owner made?
100%.
Totally, right? So if you get to understand what your undervaluing and your overvaluing biases are, and you remember that you're not your thinking, these are thinkings that are going on, then you are back in control. Because if you recognize that you're overvaluing or undervaluing, you can say, stop, hold on a minute. I'm actually undervaluing my business here because I'm emotionally connected to it, and I need to do something about it, and I need to make a better decision.
Well,
so the power of that.
Hopefully that's also where the accountability of a board comes in an organization.
Yes.
Because of ethics and accountability, and basically the saying where the fish rots from the head down. So it's the intrinsic, it starts with the intrinsic values and the values of the organization and the culture of the organization. It comes from the leadership, which comes from the CEO, because it's his vision. He's the one driving the bus. So this is like super powerful stuff, right? Super powerful.
So just on that, then that's why I'm a certified chair now. When I'm putting together boards, advisory boards, I'm making sure that there's no biases that the board members come with, right? Because a board member, just like a human being, can come with their own biases. They might undervalue that business or overvalue that business from their own bias perspective. Now that board member is then passing on to the business owner advice, not neutral advice, but biased advice based upon that board member's own emotional biases.
Got it.
Now, that is a profoundly impactful thing for a business owner to realize. That, just because they're a board member and they're subject matter experts doesn't mean to say that they don't bring their own biases, their own values and valuation judgments to what they see about that person.
I've seen this play out with some of the CEOs that I've consulted to, and unfortunately, sometimes they've got such a hell bent on their belief and their value, they'll just drive it through like a train going through the end of the stop in the shopping center, and there's bodies everywhere. And they don't care. Their value seems to be higher value than the damage they cause. And I've seen it take out million-dollar businesses, multi-million-dollar businesses.
Absolutely, Fred. And likewise as well, some of the organizations that we've worked with, they've been going down a track and they've been hell-bent on that, and they've caused themselves pain. They've caused them their business pain, and they've caused a pain in their strategy, and the whole thing falls apart like a house of cards.
Yeah.
And its root cause is how they valued and what they were valuing. So let's just continue in the extrinsic, and we're looking at the example of a business. A business owner might say, look at the products and services of the business. Now, sometimes those products and services can be overvalued or undervalued. Would you agree?
No,
a product or service can be overvalued, and say that they might think overly highly about their products and services, even though the marketplace is telling them otherwise.
Right? Very common.
Overshoot, over promise and under deliver. It's overvaluation.
Or
let's look at
pushing that product that doesn't have a market, and they won't let it go. They won't let it go. They valued the product, and the product has no value.
Exactly, right? A world of pain because of bias. Look at undervaluation, right? And I'm sure you've come across some innovators and inventors who have kind of undervalued their products or service. In other words, it had tremendous potential, but they undervalued it for some reason.
The
Right?
digital watch was a perfect example of that. It was undervalued in its conception. And then that digital watch was taken to Japan, and the rest is history. Goodbye Swiss watches for quite a few years. So that was a serious case of undervaluation of an innovation, and the cost was horrendous to the Swiss watch market.
And another example here is overvaluation. Is an inventor who has invented something, and they might be saying, "This is my invention." So they might be overvaluing their invention. Right? They might actually be overvaluing the product itself as well in their invention. And so what do? They hold it to themselves and they don't let it go. Right? So they overvalue it. They become emotionally attached to the product and they don't let it go into the marketplace. So let's look at the third example here, systemic. A business plan, a quality checking process of the business. Overvaluation of a strategic initiative or undervaluing of our strategic initiatives. We see this all the time. We can overvalue the business plan, saying that we've just spent 3 weeks in a retreat, or 3 days in a retreat, and we've got this business plan, come back into the organization and they've overvalued the business plan, right? And they put so much time and effort on the strategy, thinking through the strategy, that they've left no time for the product or the identification with the product. And the one that I come across most of the time when we're doing strategic planning is they're undervaluing of their business plan. So in other words, you go away on a 3-day retreat, you come up with a business plan, and what happens to the business plan? It gets put into the bottom drawer of the business, and they go about doing what they've always done, and after a while they forget about the business plan. And so what that is an undervaluing of a systemic item. All right.
Yeah.
So you see how this plays out in a business context.
I do, because one of the challenges I'm having in the moment, I'm consulting to a couple of organizations. One particular lady, she has 3 therapeutic massage premises been shut for 7 months, and a Thai restaurant, and the other one has the allied health clinic. And with the systemic values in the business plan and checking the processes of the businesses, I'm oscillating from over and undervaluation all the time, and my own biases and assessment of these. And I've had to eat humble pie on certain things quite a bit, because these people are running big organizations, and they've got some experiences I don't have. So where I see this useful in the business plan, checking the quality of the process, is to recognize where you're at with that valuation, to get some sort of accountabilities and feedback loops to say, well, hang on, is this functioning or system? We've set up a meeting agenda that's been, I wanted to stick a pencil in my eye, I've hated it. And then in the last week, I finally seen the place for where the presentation to me is coming from. And I've had to apologize and go, oh my God, sorry it took so long for me to get on board and get present to this. Now I've embraced it and moved it forward. But my God, there was some resistance from me because I undervalued it. I undervalued it. Guilty.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see. Yeah, great.
Now I'm not overvaluing it, but I'm certainly invested and on board now, because what was inefficient is becoming efficient.
So one of the objectives of this, Fred, is the overvaluation and undervaluation is emotional. It's generally connected to an emotional. And the aim in here is to get to a neutrality. A neutrality where you're not overvaluing or undervaluing, where, in other words, you're listening to that advisor from a non-biased perspective. Right? So in my business, I'm listening to my internal advisor about my business. I'm thinking about my business from a neutral position, not an overvaluation or an undervaluation. And that is the sort of the way in which the valuations come into the values. Let's just continue and go to the next sort of segment. And this is thinking about ourselves as a leader. Let's just see how this plays out in the world of leadership. Someone who intrinsically values themselves. I am a leader. Have you ever come across any leaders who have overvalued themselves as a leader? I'm the bee's knees. I overvalue. They're not saying it. I overvalue themselves as a leader. Have you ever come across any leaders on the opposite who have undervalued themselves as a leader?
I worked for one of the big four banks, and
Yeah.
I saw it all. The good, the bad, the ugly. What can I say? And I went through a restructure where 1,000 people every 6 months are getting the boot. So yeah, look, I saw leadership in its shame and in its glory. There were some wonderful, astute human beings there, and there were people there. I think you need to check the pulse. It's
so what I would say, if you were analyzing that sort of situation, what you would probably have seen is some leaders who would overvalue themselves as a leader, and speaking themselves up too highly. Their self-esteem goes out over the roof, and there's some leaders there who might have had something to say. They were leaders, they've seen themselves as leaders, but they might have undervalued themselves as a leader and how they could have influenced that situation.
Well, the exciting part is I had the profound, what do you call it, pleasure? Honor of taking some people who are acting team leaders and acting management. And I don't think anyone's done this before, but in 12 months, I promoted 11 people, and their promotions retained and stayed. And I could see they were highly, highly undervalued by the people who are overvaluing themselves. That was the relationship.
Yes.
So they were never going to promote these people because they were getting leverage for nothing. I promoted these people, much to their chagrin, and the end result is the ones that are promoted are mainly still there, and the ones that didn't promote are gone.
Yes. So you see how this works out.
Oh, yeah.
So what was, just let me ask you a question about that sort of example. What was the potential economic impact on that? You kind of, not promoting, and the economic or the efficiencies that you gain by promoting.
Oh, horrendous. The productivity. One of the major things I was doing in that role was preventing burnout and people having nervous and breakdowns and marriage breakups, because the stress level in IT is very high. So when you talk about financial impact on the organization, it's huge, because there are always huge costs affected if something goes down. But what about the human cost as well? And then the follow on from the human cost, all of a sudden, all that IP walks out the door or falls out the door. So, what could I say? The financial impact there of over and undervaluation in the corporate world, in these big juggernauts, is phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
So what I'm going to say, Fred, is what we alluded to earlier on, that you recognize that you have an ability to be neutral when it comes to working with people. You're not overemphasizing, you recognize, because you come from a neutrality of kind of harmony, or seeing the benefits and sort of downplaying the problems associated with people. You see it and can make decisions. Now, I want you to think about that. Some of the decisions you might have made in that instance came from the fact that you didn't have an overvaluation or undervaluation. You had a neutrality about the importance of that person and seen it in its true light, and were able to balance it. And hence you made decisions and promoted people because you've seen the potential in them rather than undervalued or overvalued them.
I'll never forget it, Ron. It's powerfully emotional. There was one situation where a particular person of the female gender was harassing a male gender, and he nearly had a nervous breakdown and was going to leave his job. And I got involved and unpicked all this thing, and the outcome was there was apologies all around, and they both went on to bigger and better things. But the organisation, aside from me, had no resource to deal with that. It was going to escalate and escalate until there was a train smash and arms and legs come off, until I got angry and I stood up and I said, enough, let's pull this apart and see it for what it is. And there was about 15 people had this guy in their gun sights. Every one of them, I actually got them to formally apologize to him. And that guy has since left that organisation, highly successful somewhere else. And every now and then on LinkedIn, I get a really good plug and stuff like that. So, look, for me, people's face. I just saw so many people suffering. Yeah.
And you know what? Let's just think about the productivity loss, the efficiency loss, the dollar loss for dynamics that go on in organizations like that. It's we talk about a pandemic. That is of a similar virus nature within an organization that happens at this valuation and values sort of level. And it's unseen, Fred. It's like a virus. It is unseen. It's value, the biases that are below the surface that eventually manifest themselves into real sort of circumstances which destroy businesses, destroy people's lives. And so we are far from making businesses the efficiencies that they can get, and we spend so much money, wasted time on doing things in ways that could be done a lot better. And so that's why I'll just go back to coming across this body of knowledge. This is let's just say this is a scientific approach, and there's a lot more under the hood than what I'm actually sort of delivering here at the moment. That this whole thing is based upon transfinite mathematics, right? So I just want to emphasize that this is a model of framework which is robust, solid, and so I don't want to go too much into that description at the moment, but what I want to sort of express is that this can save organizations a world of pain, a world of loss, a world of lost money.
Just in the first two, Ron, the intrinsic and extrinsic, which you haven't covered yet, and even the systemic, these three, and the leadership, there was a project that was about, I think something like an $8 million project. And these people were doing a world first, and they got this project to about 90 to 95% there, and they were going to deliver. And I guess their time frame for delivery was 3 to 4 months. Well, the other leadership beyond that project sacked everyone on the project except 2 of the minor roles and brought other people in. The project got totally destroyed and took 2 years to unfold after that incident. And when I saw the destroyed lives, because these people had mortgages to pay and they'd been involved in the process and the organisation for 10 and 15 years, and a restructure without any human compassion or content just come in and said, we see that the profit is strip and burn, crash and burn, change direction. And I've seen this happen in corporations, and I thought, how can I embrace the culture when it's almost like AI is running it and there's no human element. It's very
all right.
Scary.
So I'm really pleased that you're relating to this, and you can see, from your own experiences, the insights that is possible from doing this. So let's go into the extrinsic. So that is, from a leader's perspective, I have a role to play as a leader. And, some of your examples might be that, a leader, you've seen leaders overvalue the role that they play. And then you've seen leaders who have undervalued the role that they play. Maybe some of those leaders that you promoted did undervalue themselves, and you were instrumental in bringing their valuation up. So they didn't undervalue themselves, but they maybe come into neutrality or really valuing themselves. And we know that some leaders do overvalue themselves in the role that they play as leader, and thinking they can actually get projects pushed through because it's them that are the leader, and they can push the project through and overvalue themselves and what they can achieve, and to sometimes disastrous as well as collateral damage.
Huge ego influences there, huge egoic influences.
Totally.
It's to do with character and personality and ego, because look, from the intrinsic and intrinsic value, when there's an accurate valuation and some reflection, and this to me ties back to reactions and responses.
Yes.
So
Yes.
with someone who has a balanced perspective, there'll be responses, and therefore they'll find that neutrality in there. But people who are reacting, they're going to flip one way or the other.
Yes, they are. They are. And you know, the call for leadership today is the agility. The leaders have to be agile. And if you're going down one route all the time, as Abraham Maslow used to say, if I only have a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail, right? If I only have this one style of leadership, then I'm just going to hammer everything just the way I do it. But if you've got a screw to go into a piece of wood, you've got a hammer, that ain't going to work, right? So you need to be agile. And so what is the challenge for leaders today is to foster that ability to be agile and be across the situation and not be emotionally charged with their own overvaluation or undervaluation of what they say. They need to get to a point of neutrality around it and operate from a point where they can go over or under, depending upon what the situation is actually dictating that they do. Now, all right, let me go to the systemic. And, you know, I can see my leadership direction. And again, you can think about this in a number of different contexts, but some politicians, for instance, right? You can see themselves in their leadership direction is totally overvalued, right? The electorate might not value them at all, but they think that they are the best thing since sliced bread. So they value the direction in their political career. You can see what that's happening. And then some underlying sort of people might say they undervalue their leadership direction. They have a lot of potential, but they're undervaluing what goes next and how it's going to work out for them. All right. So any comment on that? We've kind of explored that pretty extensively. I think
we spent a lot of time on it, but it's impacting me, Ron. I can't take all this in and not be affected because what it's doing, it's actually showing me the good, the bad, the ugly, not just in others, but within my own self and beingness. So this is very helpful.
So remember the comment I said that the values and valuations are at the root of our abilities, our beliefs, our personalities. So this is the difference between the psychological perspective and the philosophical perspective. The psychological perspective looks at beliefs, looks at personalities, but what this science is saying is that there's peel it back another layer, and what we find is that all personalities are rooted in the way in which they value things intrinsically, extrinsically, and systemically, outside the world and inside themselves. All right, so here we get a little bit personal, Fred,
I'm good with it.
I'm not going to debrief you on this. I'm going to send you the report, and I'm going to debrief you on your report individually. So what I thought we would do in this session, just introduce you to the concept of formal axiology. What you see in here is a summation of the way in which it works out for you. But what I will do is I'll focus on one particular area, which will sort of satisfy the conversation that we've just had, Fred. And so the area that I wanted to sort of look at is this area here. Now, anything above a 7 is regarded as a high score. The aim of this profile is to get to neutrality, to not be overvalued or undervalued, or not to overvalue the aspects or undervalue the aspects. So when I said earlier on that one of your strengths was your ability to be see people for their value, what this is showing us here is you have an 8.2. What that means is a clarity. You have a clarity around people. You see people. As a high clarity score you have there. It's above 7. You also have a neutrality. You don't overvalue or undervalue people. So combine that with the clarity you have about people, and you're not biased about overvaluing them or undervaluing them. You see them in neutrality. Now, your position from that is your advice that you're getting from your internal advisor with regards to people is very, very clear, and it's very, very neutral. That's why you're so good at what you're doing and when you work with people. Does that sort of make sense to you?
Hmm. Hmm. I hadn't self-analyzed. I just
No.
do what I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, I can see the advisors when often I'm in a situation and it says world bias pattern judge. You know, one of the judgments I make is not to judge. You know, like when people are pouring out their stuff, I go into a neutral space in counselling. Every time I counsel, I'm in a neutral space. I have to be, because otherwise I'm not going to get their reality. They're going to get a projection.
Yeah. So, you know, so just this is just one facet. This is the intrinsic sort of value and valuation of your relationship with people. Let me go to the next sort of screen. And the reason why I'm doing this is because to show the integration, and I think you'll appreciate this. So this is the added sort of factor to this, Fred, and we're going to look at it from an integral theory perspective, right? And so where I want it to go is the worldview. Now, you know that, and I know, when we look at the integral theory, then we look at the outside world. We're not, this is the, you know, the inside world up in the top left-hand quadrant, right? This is our self view in the inside world. And here is our outside world. So we look at things at behavior, systems, and culture. And so you can see the clarity scores here: 7.6 when it comes to people, 9 when it comes to the system, and 8.2 when it comes to people. So I want to emphasize the same thing I just spoke to you about with regards to the people. When you think about cultures and working with people, you see this here very, very clearly.
Got it.
People and feeling, right? High clarity score, neutrality, harmony of others, not overvalued or undervalued, conflict of others, not undervalued or overvalued, just neutral. Now, that position means that you will make decisions, you will see things that other people don't see. So that then becomes an attribute, a talent, a way of looking at things that gives you a skill in that area. All right. So there we go. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you your profile, and we'll, you know, pick another time to go through your profile in a little bit depth, one that might not be so public. And I know you're always up for a challenge, and I know you wouldn't flinch from it, but I would want you, now you've got the context, I'm going to send you your report, and you're going to look at it and get to know it a little bit more thoroughly.
Well, Ron, I'm just blown away. You never cease to amaze me with all the stuff we've worked on together over the years. I've always jokingly, but with some seriousness, said that you're one of Australia's best kept secrets because, well, you know, people are unaware that it was you who was instrumental bringing what the bleep to Australia, and that you have brought the world game here from Buckminster Fuller. You've had a lot of firsts and initiatives, and now being the first qualified axiologist, is that correct in Australia?
Well, I'm the only recognized axiologist by the Robert Hartman Institute. So we should speak a little bit about the background, if we can, Fred.
We can, yeah, because that's going to add value.
Yeah. So let me go back, just flick through here, go back to where we started here. So I might come off screen share so we can have a...
Yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah. Because I think people are going to get a lot of value out of seeing this, right? And that's why I was open for you to share, and I don't mind people seeing my warts and all the rest of it. But yeah, and the debrief will take longer, and I think keeping these videos to a sensible time too, that people don't want to sit around for hours and hours and hours. They just want good content quickly and move on, short attention spans. So go for it.
So let me tell you a little bit about Robert Hartman. Robert Hartman grew up in Nazi Germany. Robert Hartman grew up there, and he's seen what evil was. And it plagued on Robert Hartman's initial life. And he said, if evil can organize itself so well to do such damage in the world, why can't good be organized is equally as well to do good in the world? So his life journey was an exploration of what good is. And he came up with one of the most profound definitions of what good is. And it's the axiom of value, the principle of value. And basically, underpinning what all Robert Hartman's work was, out of which Formal actually came, was good is defined as something that fulfills its concept or idea of what it's meant to be. So give you an example. If we have an idea of what a chair should look like, it's got to be knee high, it's got 4 legs, and it's got a back, right? When we walk into a furniture shop, we will look into the furniture shop and we will say that good chairs will be good chairs if they fulfill the concept of what we have in our head of 4 legs, knee high, and a back, right? So we'll say that's a good chair. Now just say that we came across a piece of furniture in the furniture shop and it was knee high, 4 legs, but it didn't have a back. We say, that's not such a good chair, that's a stool, right? Right? If we were defining what a good stool looked like, we'll say, well, it's knee high and got 4 legs, it doesn't have a back. That'd be a good stool, but it's not a good chair, right? So the concept that we have of what things good, what's below the form of axiology is the axiom of value, that things are a fulfillment of its concept. So that's a philosophical position to come from, not a psychological position to come from. So the psychology of the philosophy of that is that we look for things which fulfills our ideal of what good looks like, intrinsically, extrinsically, and systemically, inside ourselves and outside ourselves. We are constantly looking for things that look to fulfill our concept of what we think good is. So Robert Hartman, throughout his life, he was a professor. He fled Germany. He ended up living in Mexico, and from Mexico he used to go back and forward from Mexico into the USA. He actually was a professor at the Tennessee University in the USA. He hung around in philosophical circles. He was in correspondence with Abraham Maslow, so he was of that era. You know, he hung around with those guys. And there is archival manuscripts that say that Abraham Maslow was influenced by Robert Hartman. But you hear more about Abraham Maslow than you do about Robert Hartman. So, you know, behind a lot of the great sort of psychoanalysts that came out of that sort of era, they were influenced by Robert Hartman's work. Now, you might say, why isn't Robert Hartman known? Why isn't formal axiology known? Well, it's one of those sort of quirky little things that happen that people just go under the radar. You can ask multiple people when they talk about quality control systems in an organization if they've ever heard of Edward Deming, and they'll go, who? Edward Deming was actually the grandfather of quality assurance systems, right? So Robert Hartman is one of the world's unsung heroes. He unfortunately had an untimely death. He went into for an operation, which is, you know, by and large fairly routine. It resulted in some complications, and he died, leaving an archive of manuscripts, unpublished works that is only now beginning to come to light due to the work that the Robert Hartman Institute is actually doing, and of the Axiology community, of which I am part, And I should say, and I hope that this particular video, if it does get public exposure, will not be before the 11th of November, because on the 11th of November, Freddie, I have been nominated to be a board member of the Robert Hartman Institute. And it's a great honor and a great sort of privilege, and I'm really excited about being able to expose more people to the work of Robert Hartman and formal axiology in the world, because it's one of those things that is needed. It's needed. We need a science of value in order to cut through a lot of the conflict, even in this day that we're seeing, even in the US with the political system over there. We need a moral science.
We do need a moral science. Absolutely.
Formal axiology is a moral.
Hello? I think we just frozen up, Ron. Oh, that's a shame. Maybe you're, yeah, I'll turn the recording off. Oh, yeah, you're back. We had a glitch there. I'll be able to doctor that out later. Yeah, so moral, I'll be able to do that.
The moral science, we need a moral science. And formal axiology is in the same ilk as natural science. It is a moral science. And you know, as I alluded earlier on, there's a lot of mathematics below this, and the results in it. It's a formula based upon transfinite mathematics. It's been proven, it's been validated multiple times, and it's a very sort of robust model. And I'm excited to be part of an organization that is, looking at ways in which more people are exposed to it. So that's my mission.
Awesome. I'm glad you got it all out. I was just going to reinforce something to give the credence to what you're saying. I mean, growing up, I got scant information and just minor exposure to Nikola Tesla's work, right?
Yeah.
Now, in the last 15, 20 years, and especially even now, Tesla motor vehicles and Tesla technology, I mean, that guy was just tumbled under the rubble, and it's a horrendous story. And just a modern day story of another one of Australia's best kept secrets, Marvin Oka, you know, from the NLP community. Now, a lot of people, because there's so much hoo-ha about NLP, but Marvin's a lot deeper than that, and he's one of the top behavioural modellers in the world. And just for your information, so you know what I've been up to, because we haven't touched base for a while, I've recently gone through a certification with Marvin and done behavioural modelling. So I'm one of the rare behavioural modellers on the planet. So I really have always been passionate about what you're into with the integral theory and the spiral dynamics. We spent many years chewing there. One of my videos got about 7,000 views. I took it down a couple of years ago because I thought I just felt it was Ken Wilber that brought it there, not Freddie, but I had #1 position on Google for like about 5 years. So I took it down out of conscience. I've put it back up. It's had 25 views.
Yeah, right.
Well, you know, it was with the ladder and the whiteboard. But look.
Yeah, just on that, Freddie. Me, I've been around the integral community for a number of years, and what I've done is an analysis of the integral consulting organizations that have existed that I've been part of and help form as well as do work within. And every one of them, I can actually put even the integral community, you can put it through this lens. And you can see the downfall of the integral community and what they've overvalued and undervalued in the integral community, and what has led to, you know, less than successful interventions sometimes with integral approaches, because it's been overvalued or under an element of what they've been doing has been overvalued or undervalued. And it's quite fascinating. So this is a really interesting lens to look through a lot of things. It's not psychological, but it's got a whole lot to say about psychology.
Wow.
A whole lot, as well as a lot of other things.
Well, there you have it, folks. Ron Laurie from Fintech Solutions. And how can people get in touch with you, Ron? you know, like if people want to explore your world and find out more about you, because you're one of the most interesting characters I've met in my lifetime, I'm sure other people will be interested. So how can people find?
Well, you know, Freddie, you know, the most sort of the fullest sort of understanding of the work is my LinkedIn profile. My website has never been a systemic overvalued. I've undervalued my website presence, but I'm you know, putting some effort into that. You know, my LinkedIn profile, if you can post a link to it on when you do some edits,
I'll get you
that'd be great.
to
Yeah.
respond to that thing I sent you, because we can put all your
Yeah.
social links under the video and people can find you.
Yeah.
I had the honour and pleasure of attending a couple of World Games, and I was on one of the facilitations, which was fun. Like to do it again one day if that comes up. And also some minor parts to play in the original We Are One World and Fintech Solution website. So that's my expertise way back then. Ron, thank you for this time.